Merry meet, my fellow bookish witches. Welcome to Witchy Reads, a place where we talk about books and other bookish things. Disclaimer right off the bat, I am going to apologize in advance for any mispronunciation that I do for the names. I looked up how to pronounce them. I am going to do my absolute best to pronounce them correctly. I just want to apologize if I happen to mess that up. My book club picked an interesting time to read Iron Widow by Xiran Jay Zhao. From the shenanigans surrounding the sequel's release, to the disaster that was the Hugo Awards, and to the surprising hot takes regarding how Iron Widow portrays what many consider the incorrect way to be feminist. Because you see, the main character of Iron Widow is not only called to act in order to save herself and the many women before her and the women coming after her, but she is furious about it. What is anger? Many would answer that it is just an emotion and everyone has it. But is everyone allowed to use it? To express it? I would argue no, not everyone is allowed to express anger. Anger is simply a human emotion, neither good nor bad. Author Soraya Kimberly explains in a TED Talk that anger is a signal emotion meant to warn us of indignities, threats, insults, or harm. However, many cultures and societies have deemed anger as the moral property of boys and men. This isn't meant to be a blanket statement, as there are many tonal differences even within the social group of boys and men. But regardless of those tonal differences, one fact always remains: anger is gendered. Iron Widow follows 18-year-old Wu Zetian, a woman in a heavily traditional and conservative culture who has just offered herself up as a concubine pilot. A concubine pilot is the female second half of a two-pilot-controlled chrysalis, essentially a giant transforming mech robot, created to battle the mecha aliens who have invaded the planet. The downside to this is that women pilots very rarely, if at all, survive battles. This is made evident by Zetian's older sister recently passing in a similar fashion, though we learn it wasn't a battle that killed her, but a male pilot. In this world, there really isn't a difference because the male pilots are what kill the women during battle. As they both harness their chi to control the mech robots, the men usually end up siphoning all of the chi from the women, and that is what ends up killing them. This YA fantasy has largely been compared to Pacific Rim meets Handmaid's Tale, and I would say that that is fairly accurate, especially the Pacific Rim part. Imbued with seething anger at not only her sister's death, but the deaths of thousands upon thousands of other women in this name of glory for these male pilots, Zetian seeks revenge. But I have no faith in love. Love cannot save me. I choose vengeance. Initially, she focuses her revenge on only one thing: assassinating the pilot responsible for her sister's death. She knows this is a long shot, and she knows that even if she gets close to this guy and manages to kill him, she will likely be killed for her actions. It is made explicit in the text that this character couldn't care less. The only other character who is made aware of this plot is her best friend Ichi, who, before she can leave to join the other concubine pilots, confesses his true feelings for her in the form of a marriage proposal. I've got to hand it to this character. He took his chance. It may not have worked out, but I give him props for that, especially since strong women do not intimidate him. Unfortunately for him, Zetian does not have time for this sentimentality when murder is on her brain. She refuses his offer of marriage and soon finds herself with a group of other concubine pilots selected for this specific pilot. Zetian's plan is to kill the pilot before actually having to get into the mech to battle with him, because she feels once that happens, she will have zero chance of enacting her assassination plot. Just imagine her fury when she is dragged into battle with said pilot before she can enact her revenge. But Zetian surprises everyone when she manages to reverse the odds. And instead of her dying during battle, he does. Welcome to your nightmare! Do you think it was demure submissiveness that gave you that iconic scene? It is rather rare to come across a society where everyone is not taught to disdain anger in girls and women. And when children are taught this, it creates adults, men or women, who decide that it is their duty to penalize when anger is expressed in girls and women. This kind of upbringing is demonstrated in Iron Widow and is made easily to understand and digest simply based on the culture and society that Zetian is born into. This is more reflective of real life than I think many readers of Iron Widow realize or care to admit to themselves. Because by Zetian not only expressing her anger, but acting upon it, seems to have made readers angry at the character. Wasn't her anger justified? Earned even? To a lot of readers, no, it wasn't.
This is a reimagining of China's only female emperor. How do you think she got that position? By being nice?
I found it interesting that so many wanted to sever Zetian's anger from her femininity, when in fact anger was the emotion that best protected her and the other characters from continued injustices throughout the story, as anger does for real-world women. So why is having an angry woman in an arguably popular novel grating on so many people? Perhaps it's because having an angry female character is something that is still rather new in literature. In the grand scheme of things, women authors are still a newish concept. We are still fighting to get our voices on equal ground in this community. So up until recently, the novels written by men couldn't conceive of an angry woman. At least not in the way Zhao has created in her book, because they would very rarely encounter such an angry woman that wouldn't, in some way or another, be tamed or contained by the end of their narrative. This continued approach in what emotions are okay for women to express influenced the psyche of readers, particularly women, by creating a behavioral mold for them to adhere to, thus creating a vicious cycle in literature. Because it was expected that women would be modest in their mannerisms in both life and fiction. You'd be surprised in that this also includes women who supposedly fight for equality and are considered by many to be feminists. Be strong, fight for us, but don't you dare raise your voice. That's not allowed. Even though suppressing all women's angst, agonies, and injustices demonstrates how deep-rooted this patriarchal narrative is. Authors like Zhao are here to dismantle this male narrative by languishing proudly in their female fury, as they should, because women and feminists are allowed and should be angry. After Zetian completes her assassination on the male pilot who murdered her sister, instead of being sentenced to death, she is assigned to the strongest male pilot, Xiran, the Iron Demon.
Oh, he's kind of cute. He's a murderer, but he's kind of cute.
He is a former death row inmate and pilot of the largest mech, the Vermilion Bird. Xiran is more of a morally gray himbo. Obviously, he also becomes one of Zetian's love interests. Yes, this story has a love triangle, but I guarantee you it is not what you think. I'll talk about that in a bit. In this new dynamic, Zetian and Xiran are the pariahs of the military, but the higher-ups, called strategists, don't necessarily want to do anything physically violent to them because they are the strongest pairing in the war against these mech aliens. They need them. This, of course, doesn't stop the other pilots from resenting them or trying to harm harm them themselves. One of the assassination attempts made against Zetian is thwarted by Ichi, who soon after Zetian had left, decided to follow her and become a military strategist himself. This is a big class shift for this character because he does come from a wealthy family. But there doesn't seem to be any consequences for that choice, even though it is made very clear in the beginning when he proposes to Zetian that it wouldn't work because of his status. Ichi immediately convinces the other strategists to allow him to live with Zetian and Xiran. This leads to some interesting interactions between Zetian and Ichi because he is the other love interest and clearly the heavy-handed one, as their feelings for each other were well established in the beginning.
Yes, Daddy.
But then we see interactions between Ichi and Xiran. You are hit with some intense sexual tension between these two. And I immediately got excited because did this book really just give us a genuine love triangle? Polyamory and all? Yes. Yes, that is exactly where we are.
Who will you choose?
Why don't we all just fuck each other?
It's more of a love triangle than any other young adult fantasy, and I'm here for it. But enough about the love. Let's get back to the anger. Since Zetian survived her first assassination plot, she has now shifted her revenge from a single entity to the destruction of the entire military-industrial complex that has been murdering innocent women for centuries. A lofty goal, considering she is a woman in this society, but I love her spirit. A big reason this shift occurs is that Zetian is now semi-integrated with other Iron Princesses. These are concubine pilots who also survived battles with their male counterparts. And because of that, they have been permanently paired with these male pilots. Most of them, and I actually believe all of them, being married to their male pilots. Whereas Zetian was able to remain in the shadows before conducting her assassination of the other male pilot, now she's in the spotlight and she needs to have allies, which is what she is hoping the other Iron Princesses will be for her. But despite the risks of being in the spotlight presents, she doesn't hide or dampen her anger or hatred at this system. She makes it very clear where she stands, and she lets every male pilot strategist that she comes across know what she thinks of them. In terms of female solidarity, I will admit that Zetian could have maybe done a little bit better in trying to connect with the Iron Princesses. And I can understand the criticism of her not reaching out to these other women, specifically for genuine friendship versus strategic political reasons. Her goal is to dismantle this corrupt system that is murdering girls and women. If she happens to make friends with other Iron Princesses, that's just a perk for her. That doesn't mean she doesn't care. That doesn't mean she's not a girl's girl or a woman's woman. I believe if the situation was different, if the society was different, she would be all about girl friendships and wanting that. Heck, we see her trying to interact with her family early on in the book, wanting to have those connections with her mother, with her grandmother, and she doesn't get that back. While I understand the criticism here, many aren't looking at the context of why Zetian isn't taking the path that many would consider the way to go. It's a little unfair to expect her to be focusing on female friendships when murder and death is constantly around them, and they only get 2 weeks to regain their chi energy before they are forced back into battle. Of the 2 Iron Princesses that she attempts to engage with, one is extremely violent towards her right off the bat. The other is overly sweet, almost a complete polar opposite of the other Iron Princess. And quite honestly, between the two, the clingy, overly sweet one is the one I immediately became suspicious of. While the other girl was violent, her reasons for not wanting to be buddy-buddy with Zetian made sense. Both interactions honestly kind of gave me some ick factor, but I think they are valid depictions of reactions that would happen in this world. After this interaction, Zetian backs off from trying to gain favor with the other Iron Princesses. She's accepted that if any change is going to happen, she's probably going to have to do it on her own. She also doesn't make any attempts to reach out to the other concubine pilots. These are ones that haven't been paired with a male pilot and are simply sent up for slaughter during battle. Again, there has been criticism for her inaction in terms of trying to rescue these women. How did you expect her to do that? Without any power. She was held prisoner for most of the book. She is trying to find a way to dismantle this entire system, but if you were wanting her to do it piecemeal and potentially get caught, I guess that would have been a way to go. I personally don't think that was the smart way to go. I believe what she is trying to do is the smart way, and ultimately, big picture, would fix everything versus only saving a few women. She wants to save everyone. It is here we see how a woman utilizes her anger the way real world women are raised to do, quietly, stealthily, focused. Where Zetian is in the story, trying to rescue each concubine pilot one at a time will definitely end in failure. Yes, she is angry. Yes, she is out for bloodthirsty revenge. But more than that, she wants to succeed in saving as many women as possible. Her ultimate success in dismantling this system is what will rescue these women. Her anger is a major part of what is fueling those motivations. Another thing that is wildly lost in this discourse is remembering that in this society, so much is hidden, not only from the regular citizens, but specifically from the women, even more so. Men want us so badly for our bodies, yet hate us so much for our minds. They are completely subservient, aren't allowed access to electronic devices, and are made to rely heavily on men. This is why a lot of women in the story who aren't in a position to marry well are sent away to be concubine pilots. Because at least in that, their family will receive money whether she is successful at fighting or ends up dying. Even if Zetian hadn't made the choice herself to become a concubine pilot, considering her sister was sent away, it was highly likely her family was planning on doing the same with her. Just an aside, Zetian's family is the absolute worst. Her mother and grandmother just accept their lot in life, and even if they have inner thoughts about maybe wanting things to be better for them, better for Zetian, for things to change, they never express that, and they never make moves to help her in any way. The men in her family, her grandfather, her father, and her brother are absolutely atrocious and treat Zetian as worthless, even with her new position that has allowed her to raise them out of poverty. Could not be me. If this was my family, you could not convince me to help them.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
It is at this point in the story that we hit the plot point that I felt was the biggest drag. Zetian and Li Shimin have signed a media contract that would effectively make them celebrities, much like the other Iron Princesses and male pilots. It is very much giving Hunger Games Capital Tour and brings the story to a screeching halt.
There'll be photographers, interviews, everyone will be here to celebrate you.
I would have preferred that this entire scene get eliminated from the book and instead be replaced with further exploring the mechs or have the love triangle be more developed, especially for Ichi and Li Shimin. More bisexuals. I do love that their polyamory relationship extends to the battles. Ichi joins Zetian and Li Shimin in the mech during battle, though this is never really explained how it works. We just have to go along with this, even though the seating arrangement is one of the things made pretty clear from the beginning of the book. The point of the entire media blitz scene is a way for Zetian and Li Shimin to kind of appeal to the masses, and it fails miserably, which makes the time spent on this scene even more disappointing for the reader. Part of Zetian's plan is figuring out what is going on with the seats in the mech. How the seats work is essentially there is a feminine and a masculine seat situated in such a way that the man is the big spoon and the female is the little spoon.
Can you let go now?
This is what allows the man to siphon the woman's chi to run the mech during battle. Zetian knows that there's something not quite right with this seating arrangement. To get this information, she and Li Shimin decide to kidnap a head strategist. This guy is a piece of work. He has absolutely made their lives a living hell. They end up unaliving him pretty quickly.
Oh, I love it when you're evil. This is me at my most evil. Do your evil laugh.
What they learn from him is that the female seat was always made to be the weaker seat, which is what is causing the women to die during battle almost guaranteed every single time. Women aren't necessarily weaker in chi as they've been led to believe, and in fact, more often than not, a woman is likely to have more chi than a man. So not only are the seats rigged, but the tests that test the amount of chi that someone has are also rigged, meaning that had the seats been made to be equal, chances are there would be far more male pilot deaths than concubine pilot deaths. Zetian's anger is so far beyond boiling point right now, and she uses it as the motivation for her next plan. And this trio's plan is, after the next large battle where they are trying to take back a very large province that was lost to the aliens centuries ago, they will reveal the information about the mech seats. Now, because we know everything is ready to go and is falling into place, everything absolutely goes to during this battle. One of the other mechs turns on the vermilion bird that is run by Zetian, Li Shimin, and Ichi, and this causes irreparable damage to their mech. Zetian and Ichi manage to escape while Li Shimin remains to hold off the other mech and is eventually unalived. Fueled by the newly minted anger over Li Shimin's death, Zetian decides to investigate a legendary story to awaken an ancient emperor mech pilot. This is mentioned earlier on in the book. Legend tells of this emperor who was the most powerful mech pilot ever known, and he buried himself in the belly of a volcano when he contracted a sickness in the hopes that when he wakes up, a cure will have been made. And lucky for Zetian, a cure has been made. So she finds a vial of the vaccine for this sickness and goes to look for this ancient emperor mech. With the help of some local nomads, she manages to find the correct volcano, goes into its belly, finds the ancient emperor buried within the mech, and wakes him up. She bribes this emperor with the cure for the sickness that he has in order for her to be his concubine pilot. But instead of getting into the female seat, she demands that they switch. He in the female, she in the male. This way, it is definitely more fair, and she is definitely more likely to survive. This mech is a large golden dragon, and it is massive, even more so than the vermilion bird. Her first order of business is to take out the remaining aliens that they were in the middle of battling, and then she turns her sights on the mech that betrayed her. And who is flying this mech? That overly sweet, clingy Iron Princess. I told you she was sus. Of course, now she is sorry and is explaining the reason why they turned on them is because the government is holding her children as hostages, and she tells Zetian that she had no other choice. We also learn that this is why this character convinced Zetian to raise her family out of poverty and give them a more lavish lifestyle in the hopes that they would rekindle their family bond, not knowing that there was really no family bond to mend. She wanted Zetian to understand what it means to have family and to have the government use them as leverage against you. Zetian makes it very clear to her that that was a very poor decision, considering that what she had just done in murdering Li Shimin, she already murdered her family. And then she immediately unalives both that pilot and her male counterpart. This is another point of contention for a lot of readers because they see it as this person didn't have a choice. Her children children were being held hostage. And on one hand, I get that, and I'm not one to justify unaliving anyone. However, for this particular pilot, it was a lose-lose situation. They were hoping that Zetian would be the one to show more mercy, not realizing that she probably was the worst bet. But that is neither here nor there. Honestly, looking at the story, I would say that there was no winning for them. They were either going to die or their children were going to die. And you can look at it as they did the honorable thing in doing what they did, because at the very least, their children weren't the ones that were killed. I don't blame Zetian for doing what she did, and I feel like to sit here and say that she is a horrible person is missing the point. Li Shimin was her family. Her family was killed. She's not going to feel bad about this woman's children being held hostage when she literally just killed her family. Zetian then flies the dragon to the large city where she sees that the government is also holding her family hostage, her grandparents, her parents, and her brother. And they are doing this in the hopes that it can convince her to stop her rampage. What I like about this encounter is that it is in this instance that her parents realize that they are absolutely screwed. They don't try to justify their actions. They don't try to apologize because it would be meaningless. They don't try to beg for mercy for themselves. The only thing they ask for is for her to please show mercy on her brother. They will die. She can have them, but please save your brother. In that moment, Zetian fully sees how little she actually meant to them, and she just unalives them herself, including her brother. A lot of people say that she should have been willing to save her family. And I, again, ask you, why? At what point in the book has her family shown any remorse, any sign that they want to mend things with her? They just don't. Even the women, her grandmother and her mother, treated her horribly. There was never an instance that they reached out to her, showed her any type of compassion. There are moments internally where she says, please give me a sign, say something to me to show me that you love me. And they just don't. So I'm not going to feel bad about the choices that she made. I'm not going to feel bad that she did what she had to do in exerting her anger on everything that has happened to her. Part of that is the abuse that was heaped on her for years by her family. It's at this point that Zetian essentially declares herself empress, which is completely a boss move.
I miss the girl you were.
Many will. She was easier to kill.
Now, the book ends with a twist and a little bit of a cliffhanger. Since I've given pretty much every other spoiler away that is in this book, I'm going to hold off on describing exactly what that twist is and what the cliffhanger is. I do think it is well worth the read to figure it out. I know I was pleasantly shocked by it, and I thought it was very well executed. A lot of people disagree. I'm the complete opposite. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done, and I think it was a good cliffhanger to want people to pick up the next book, which I definitely do. The thing to remember in all of this is Zetian is not a morally righteous protagonist. This is where a majority of those negative hot takes aimed at this book are coming from. Because having a woman be morally good instead of angry is what we have come to expect in these kinds of stories. That doesn't always reflect the real world or what people want to relate to, and it certainly doesn't reflect the world that Zhao has created in Iron Widow. It would have been so easy to create the nice, quiet woman you expect who also still comes out a badass boss and is able to dismantle this entire society versus the angry woman who just implodes everything and is a reflection of the trauma that she has endured. This is further established by who the character of Zetian is based on. She's based on China's first and only female emperor, Wu Zetian. Zhao has clarified that her book is in no way historical fiction, but she did pull from history about Wu Zetian's long, bloodthirsty life. In many ways, Zhao makes her character of Zetian struggle a lot more than what the real world Zetian went through. Their upbringings were different. The real Zetian came from middle class, whereas Zetian in the book came from a rural poor family. Another big difference is their inciting incident that calls them to action and anger, and ultimately leads them to the women that they become. For Emperor Zetian, it was 12 years as a neglected concubine for the emperor, then 6 years of climbing her way to the top of the concubine hierarchy to establish herself as empress to the emperor, making many enemies and losing a number of children along the way. Zhao actually has a great video series on this, and I highly recommend you watch her videos on how Emperor Zetian came to be. On the other side of this, we have the character Zetian, who has decided that the world she lives in needs to change after the death of her sister, and learning what other concubine pilots endure during battle before being drained of chi and killed. Now, her come to Jesus moment arguably comes a lot quicker than Emperor Zetian did, and I've seen this be yet another criticism hurled at Iron Widow. It is a 391-page book that needs to set up an entire world, the politics, the military, the aliens invading. I think rushing certain character attributes is warranted and fairly common when it comes to young adult fantasy. There are many fantasy books that even do this with main characters who are male. Why are we as readers so quick to forgive certain narrative devices when used for men? This really needs to stop. In both stories, Emperor Zetian and character Zetian are driven and focused, but in the fictional setting, we needed to not take 18 years to get to the main crux of the story, so it's sped up. That's usually how it works. Do I think this book could have used 100 or so more pages to flesh out certain aspects better? Absolutely. This book is far from perfect, and I do have certain narrative issues with it, but never once did I think the characters' motivations or justified anger were one of them. I think why this is something that is pushed back so hard narratively is because the one thing men seem to fear more than the chaotic rage of a woman is their focused calls for justice. An angry woman is a threat to the social order. A chaotic angry woman, scary. A woman who is angry about something, terrifying. A woman who is right about both, unstoppable. Though I will defend Iron Widow overall, including Zetian as an angry main character, this book is by no means perfect. There were some clear rough patches with the pacing that made the story feel like it was going at a clip pace. There were some rough story elements that needed to be smoothed out to make the story feel less jarring in places and would have helped with the flow of the narrative. Some story details are either skipped over or completely just not mentioned or forgotten, such as the seating arrangement in the mechs. This is a mechanic that is explained early on in the book in terms of how it works and how the mechs are controlled by the pilots, which makes Ichi's addition to Zetian and Li Shimen's Vermilion bird mech a little confusing. Where did his seat come from? Where is it in relation to them? How does the chi flow work for all three of them? That's never fully explained or shown in the book, and this was something that you couldn't necessarily hold off on explaining until the second book. We're in it now. All three of them have been in battle. This needed to be explained in this book. It's one of the things that took me out of the world building. I know I've said it a few times. I still don't fully understand the point of the media blitz scene. It added nothing to the story, save introducing Ichi's horrible father. It was definitely the most young adult scene in the book. I fully stand by the idea that the media blitz scenes should have been removed and replaced with more character development, particularly between the budding romance between Ichi and Li Shimen. I wanted more gay. Speaking of, while I loved the fact that a polyamorous relationship was included in this, I still walked away feeling disappointed by the love triangle. While being gay/bi wasn't seriously frowned upon in ancient China, men were still expected to marry and have kids before indulging in such activities. So the fact that both Ichi and Li Shimen started this relationship relationship without some real inner reflection or minor repercussions as unmarried men, it's an odd choice. And I feel like if you are going to not have those elements in the story, these characters need to have more time together to develop that relationship. It honestly felt so rushed, and I was so bummed by that. Not to mention the fact that there was enough time to get 2 love scenes of Zetian with each of the men, but we only get the men making out.
Never half-ass 2 things.
Thankfully, this is a plot point that can be addressed more in the sequel, and I really hope we get more relationship development. I did enjoy this world that Zhao created, and I think based on what she used as an influence, it works well with these characters. I'll go ahead and say it in case it already isn't clear. I really liked the character of Zetian. She is a badass, morally complicated character that I could empathize with. Women can and should get angry when injustices occur. And I feel every time that she used her anger, it was completely justified. I was with her. This character is not a good person. She is closer to a villain than a hero, and I think that is what a lot of readers misunderstood. Men don't get to gatekeep anger and then use it against women. That's not how humans work. All humans, men and women, should get to experience every range of emotion we have at our disposal. It is part of what makes us uniquely human. Another big part of that is being able to regulate those emotions. And if you stifle something like anger, you're never going to be able to regulate that and use it effectively. This is how we get people like Zetian who use it for violence. I think another important aspect that people need to remember about this book is that it is a fantasy. You are meant to suspend disbelief. If you are honestly going to sit here and tell me you are capable of believing in the mechs, the aliens in this novel, but can't wrap your head around a woman getting angry at the patriarchy of her society and going on a murder rampage only to declare herself emperor in the hopes of making the world better for women, I don't think you fully understand what this kind of wish fulfillment represents or what the author was actually trying to say. I rated Iron Widow 4 out of 5 stars. This book is definitely a debut novel. The narrative details I mentioned previously could have definitely used a once-over. However, I don't want to downplay the parts that worked or that I enjoyed. I do think this is a feminist book that does exactly what it set out to do. Yes, the MC is angry. Why shouldn't she be? She was mistreated, abused, and SA'd. She's had multiple people try to kill her, the majority being men. Any sane person would go insane with anger. Many of her actions may be horrific, but the way she is written, it's hard to feel that those actions weren't valid. Anytime she does something horrible, you do feel like, ooh, that's not great, but also like, you go girl, that's amazing. It's easier to get behind this character if you fully understand the message. She's meant to make you uncomfortable. She's meant to be that fire that you can't help but root for. Thank you for sticking with me through this. I'm really curious to know what other people think. Have you read this book? Are you one of the readers who thinks that the anger wasn't justified? Please tell me why. I'm not saying anybody is necessarily wrong in this. I just feel like a lot of context is missing by not fully understanding why this character needed to be angry. And just because she's angry doesn't mean she's not a feminist, because she is. If you would like to discuss Iron Widow more, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. If you like my videos and want to support my channel, the best way to do that right now is to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share any videos that you particularly like. It is a huge help and I greatly appreciate it. Until our next chapter together, merry part and blessed be.